That is so, because there is no worthwhile opposition to the SNP, and in a democracy there has got to be an opposition, even if it's just one person like myself.
Yeah, but you can't have known that before the election.
Oh, and it was sticking a mile that they were discontented with Labour. The Unionists were nowhere, and by the Unionists I mean the Conservative and the Liberals. For any sake, work it out for yourself, Gordon. That was a safe non-vote, which allowed me to say what I think the SNP should have been doing, and at that time weren't.
Right, so what were you trying to say then?
I was trying to say that we should be preparing for independence, because independence doesn't mean a step into the dark, as you people in the BBC try to portray it. Independence means broadening down from precedent to precedent, as Edmund Burke said more than 200 years ago, and that is what the SNP has started to do now. Not because of me, but because of the overwhelming majority at the last election.
Right, but I'm still not clear. What is it you think Alex Salmond should have been doing at least before the election?
He should have been telling us what independence meant. Independence isn't a step off the edge of a cliff. Independence has been something we've been preparing for the last 150 years. 150 years ago, Secretary of State for Scotland appointed. 100 years ago, the Secretary of State became a cabinet minister. 50, 60 years ago, 4 ministers of state appointed. 1938, the Scottish Civil Service moved to Edinburgh. More power devolved to Scotland. Then we got devolution. The next step is so obviously, the right to choose our own friends round about us and throughout the world.
Now, apart from being known for your activities carting the stone of Scone around various places, you of course were a lawyer, and you're not very happy, are you, with the state of the leadership of the Scottish legal profession?
Yes, you can say that in spades. This
I was understating the case, just to give you an opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. Our human rights record in Scotland since devolution has been appalling. I would blame it particularly on 2 people, on Angiolini, the recently retired Lord Advocate, and on the Minister of Justice, what's his name?
Kenny MacAskill.
And Kenny MacAskill. You see, Angiolini came up out of the fiscal service where their duty is to get convictions. The duty of a Lord Advocate isn't to get convictions. The Lord Advocate is there to protect the public, and it's there to the office is there to protect us against wrongful prosecutions as well, not just to get convictions to satisfy the red top papers and the red tops in the BBC who blame the administration if they don't get enough convictions. If a high-profile murder goes unsolved, the red tops blame the police and the administration, and then they say the administration is soft on crime.
But are you saying that in some of these very high-profile issues where the judicial system in Scotland has been overruled, I mean, the Cadder case, for example, the slopping out business, that actually it is the Scottish justice system that was at fault for allowing these situations to develop in the first place?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. The slopping out system was a fault of, what's his name, the Wallace, when he was in charge of that, and cost us millions in damages to people who had been in prison. He spent the money elsewhere when he should have been spending it on updating the prisons. That's in the past. What's in the present is the Cadder business, and in case you've forgotten, the Cadder business is the right of every one of us charged with an offence to get legal advice before, and indeed I would go further and say while we are being interviewed by the police. That's just such a basic right. You see, Gordon, people think it's being soft in crime to let lawyers in to see accuse people. It's not. The real criminals, the heads of the departments of crime, know their legal rights. They don't have to be told them. But if your son or mine was roped in for something he didn't do, he needs legal advice. Look at Gail Sheridan. She took legal advice and didn't say anything. And then what happened to her? She was accused of, as though she had been tutored by terrorists because she just sat looking at the wall when a policeman stood or sat hurling questions at him. Well, a policeman should have been sacked.
Let's come back to that in a moment. But I'm just curious. So when you see Alex Salmond saying that the main issue, or a big issue, in the Cadder case and in the latest one, the Nat Fraser case, is that it's wrong for the Supreme Court in Britain to be involved, and that's the issue. Are you saying that's not really the issue at all? The issue is defects in the Scottish justice system?
Yes, I do say that. Alex Salmond is wrong there. The administration of justice has not yet caught up with devolution. I would have an independent advocate as Lord Advocate, and I would have a real tough in as Minister of Justice. Alec Neil, for example, if he wasn't Minister for nearly everything. We need a different view on our Minister of Justice. You know that only 3, and I think it changed yesterday to 4% of the profession think that the present Minister of Justice should hold his job. Mind you, I'd be worried if it was the other way about, and if every lawyer thought the Minister of Justice was doing a great job. You bet I'd be complaining about that. But really, Kenny MacAskill has got a solicitor's mind to what is a statesman's problem.
Now, probably the most celebrated legal case in Scotland, at least in the last decade, was the Tommy Sheridan case.
Yes.
Now, you became quite friendly, didn't you, with Tommy and Gail?
Yes.
And thought that despite what a lot of people see as a lot of evidence, that he actually got rather a bad deal.
Oh, yes. Tommy Sheridan's appeal is still ongoing. You know, he's marked his appeal. I'm not sure how far we can talk, but we could talk about Gail's case, because Gail's was substantially the case. Again, an utter scandal. You see, nobody is controlling the police. Let me give you an example, because I live in Argyll. If there's a fatal accident on the road, they close the road for 6, 8 or 10 hours because they say it could be the scene of a crime. Now that isolates a small community, and you would think that such an important thing like that would be done only by an Act of Parliament, but it's not. The ACPOS, the Association of Chief Police Officers and Superintendents, themselves decided this. And then when it came to the Gail Sheridan case, perjury, what do? They interview everyone who spoke up for the Sheridans, including Gail Sheridan, and treated all the people who spoke against the News of the World as though they were the blue-eyed people. There was no equality of investigation. If a crime has been committed, the police should look on each side, and this side they didn't. And more than that, the News of the World bought a witness for £200,000 and handed his DVD, which was supposed to hold a confession, handed that over to the Lord Advocate. And the weakness that is characteristic Angiolini's office of Lord Advocate, she used that. And then, having put Gail Sheridan through all the trauma and put her 3 or 4-year-old daughter Gabrielle through the trauma of her mother being tried in the High Court, the Lord Advocate says, lo and behold, it's not in the public interest to prosecute.
Okay, all right. Now, Luke, more general point. The poor and deprived in society. I was intrigued. I know one of your views is that no one really, including the SNP, actually represent anymore people who are disadvantaged.
Yes, this is why I became, long before his troubles, I became friendly with Tommy Sheridan. When Tommy and Gail and I meet or met, and we'll meet in the future, we don't talk about politics, we don't agree with them. But one thing we most certainly agree about, and that is that there's a dispossessed layer of society. It may not be because they're all that short of money, although lots of them are, but they're deprived of hope. And we must devise.
You don't think any of the parties, including Labour, is actually
None of the
speaking
parties, it's certainly not Labour. I mean, when did Labour speak for the poor? For any sake, don't be daft.
Now, you became famous all those years ago for stealing the Stone of Scone, which became a sort of just seen as a symbolic action. I'm just curious, I mean, I'm not suggesting you personally go and do this, but if you were to suggest to someone what an equivalent action would be now, would there be one?
I don't think so. I think I was just lucky. I mean, everybody who was anything for a couple of 100 years had said, we must get that stone back. I was just the lucky one. I was just lucky enough to do it. Mind you, I never expected it to be talked about 60 years later. But I pressed the button at the right time.
You got fed up with it, don't you?
Oh, do you bet I got fed up with it. But on the other hand, who else from my class of people in Paisley has had a reception in the Great Hall of Edinburgh Castle? Or for that matter, been interviewed by a distinguished interviewer, Gordon, who has not thrust his own ideas down my throat.
I thought I was supposed to do that all the time. I thought you claim in your blog I do that to everyone all the time.
Well, you've made an exception tonight.
All right, listen, just hearing you mention that, you're going to see the Queen, are you?
But I'll tell you about the Queen. When I was rector of Aberdeen University, it was the 500th anniversary. And a list of the people to be presented to the Queen was read out, and I was there. And to the astonishment of the University Court, I said, I am willing for the Queen to be presented to me, but I represent a civilization as rector of the university far, far older than the House of Windsor. So there were two processions into the great cathedral up there, mine led by the Lord Advocate, the others led by the Royals, and mine was the biggest. Beg your pardon.
All right.
Mine was the bigger.
I think that's a very excellent place to leave it. Ian Hamilton, thank you very much indeed.